for years, women with these mutations faced an impossible choice. Either have no children, use an egg donor, or risk passing on a potentially fatal disease.
So what is this three-parent IVF? Well, basically it's achieved by using genetic material from three individuals, the nuclear DNA from both intended parents and mitochondrial DNA from an egg donor to create an embryo. So both eggs, the intended parents and the donor eggs, are fertilized. The nuclear DNA, all the genes that make the child look like you, think like you, have your traits, is taken from the patient's fertilized egg and transferred into the donor egg, which has the healthy mitochondria, but now it has removed its own nuclear DNA.
Welcome to my fertility podcast, Superhumans.
A space for honest conversations, expert insights, and stories of resilience.
Whether you're just getting started on your fertility journey, facing challenges, or looking to educate yourself, you are in the right place.
We are Dr. Mavis Garcia
and Dr. Wise,
fertility specialists at Markham Fertility Center, located in Markham, Ontario, Canada.
Think of us as your biggest cheerleaders. Let's demystify the world of fertility together.
Superhumans, this week is Canadian Fertility Awareness Week, and we are going to do a whole episode about all the different breakthroughs that have come about in the world of fertility in the recent years. If you're trying to conceive, thinking about fertility treatment, or already going through them, chances are that in the last year you saw many headlines, such as new IVF breakthrough increases success rates, or AI chooses the best embryo, or scientists reverse egg aging. We're going to break it all down for you and talk about it so that you are up to date and well informed.
There are a few big reasons why we're seeing so much progress in this field right now. First, people are trying to conceive later in life for many very valid reasons. We're doing more years of education. There's more emphasis and more focus on building your career. Relationships, they took a bit of a backseat, especially with the COVID pandemic. And everybody's looking for financial stability before starting their family. And so that has led to more people needing fertility treatment, which has driven both research interest and funding toward the research. We're also seeing more insurance coverage and government funding, which of course we saw firsthand here in Ontario, which has been super exciting. Second, infertility and people's fertility struggles, in general, they're just being talked about a lot more and more openly. This used to be a very hidden topic or a very taboo topic. But now, we're all talking about this, whether it's social media, podcasts, obviously like this one, and in communities. And that visibility really, really matters. It reduces burden, increases funding, and attracts attention from governments, of course. And it also attracts talented researchers who want to solve problems that affect real people that they can see and hear from. Finally, technology is finally starting to catch up with biology in ways that it never has before. Computing power and, of course, artificial intelligence and lab science are all intersecting, and that's opening new doors.
It is right to be excited about all the changes, but I think it's important to understand that fertility breakthroughs rarely come as a sudden miracle. Most of these advances are incremental improvements. They are small steps, and over time, they can make treatment safer and more precise. Some of the breakthroughs we're going to talk about today represent one of those incremental improvements, and some represent bigger leaps. And all of it is part of our collective need as scientists, as researchers, as fertility specialists, to always keep asking, can we do better? What can we do to make this better?
All right, so now let's talk about some specific breakthroughs that we've seen in the last year or so. The very first breakthrough that we want to talk about is called STAR, which stands for Sperm Tracking and Recovery System. And I'm starting to hear because this story really represents a bigger leap. Okay, so let's set the context here. About 10 to 15% of people with sperm with infertility have what we call azoospermia, meaning that when we look at their sperm sample under a microscope, we're essentially seeing no sperm at all, only some kind of like cellular debris. This is a very challenging diagnosis to share with patients and often leads to really difficult conversations, sometimes a need for invasive procedures, and in some cases can even lead to using donor sperm or adoption being the only available path to parenthood. This is especially challenging diagnosis because for many people with sperm, they would have no idea that they even have this until they're actually getting a semen analysis done. So it's very difficult and jarring for people. Here's what we've known for years, though. Sometimes in these samples, even when they look empty, they actually do have sperm. They're just super, super rare. We're talking about finding maybe like 1 or 2 sperm cells amongst millions of other cells. Before STAR, embryologists would spend hours, sometimes even days, manually searching through these samples under the microscope. This is exhausting, technically difficult work, and sadly often unsuccessful. So the STAR system actually combines 3 technologies. First, it uses high-powered imaging to scan the entire sample, taking millions of images in under an hour. Second, it uses AI to analyze all of these images to identify actual sperm cells. Then there's this microfluidic system, which is able to isolate just that tiny portion of the sample and gently removes it within milliseconds.
In October of 2025, just last year, Columbia University announced the first clinical pregnancy following the use of this technology. And this was actually reported in The Lancet, which is a very prestigious scientific journal. When you hear the story, you would understand why this matters so much. The story is about this couple that has been trying to conceive for 19 years.
Wow.
They've been through 19 egg retrievals across 4 different fertility centers.
That's wild.
Yes.
Absolutely wild.
Including several cycles of egg freezing due to the inability to find any sperm with manual or surgical sperm extraction attempts. Now, using the STAR system, like Dr. Weiss explained, they scanned the semen sample. In about 2 hours, they found 2 motile sperm. Those 2 sperm were used to create 2 embryos. Both embryos were transferred, and 13 days later, the patient had her first positive pregnancy test ever. An ultrasound at 8 weeks confirmed the pregnancy with a growing fetus and a heartbeat.
That is so beautiful.
It's
That's so
incredible, right?
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this time, STAR is being used exclusively at Columbia Fertility Center. It's not yet widely available, has large clinical trials are ongoing. But I mean, as a fertility specialist, I'm very excited for this type of technology to become available. I would assume that it's going to be expensive and it needs to be trial first, which is why it's not something that you can just get just with one case study. We need to be able to make sure that it applies to the population at large and that it's actually providing value to patients. But I was moved to tears when I read the study, and I think it definitely has great potential.
Absolutely. The next breakthrough that we want to talk about involves something that I discuss with patients every single day: egg quality and its relationship to aging. If you're struggling with female age-related fertility decline, you've probably heard us or one of the other physicians here say something along the lines of, as we age, egg quality declines. The chromosomes in the egg don't separate properly during cell division. And so there's a higher proportion of embryos with an incorrect number of chromosomes, leading to embryos that don't stick, like a negative pregnancy test, or higher risk of miscarriage. And you've probably kind of nodded along, maybe asked a few questions, but I think the question that so many people ask is, but why is this happening? And what can we do about it? And it's a very, very valid question. For the longest time, we really didn't have any great answers. And as far as questions go, that's been driving researchers for decades. What's interesting is that as of the past year, we've gotten what seems to be like one of the clearest answers yet. So let's take a step back here, back to the core of female age-related fertility decline and discuss what actually is happening. If we go back to high school biology, you may remember something called meiosis. Meiosis is a particular type of cell division that our gamete cells, whether it's sperm or eggs, go through to ensure that they have the appropriate, correct number of chromosomes to be able to then create a genetically normal embryo upon fertilization. In human eggs, the process of meiosis actually spans over decades. All throughout, it is very important that these sister chromatids, which are these 2 identical copies of a single chromosome, remain linked together until exactly the right moment during cell division when they have to split apart evenly. Think of them like the letter X held together at the midpoint. As eggs age, the midpoint becomes loose and the chromosomes start separating too early, leading to an uneven split at the time of division. This will lead to embryos ending up with either too many or too few chromosomes. The errors in chromosome numbers are what we know as aneuploidy, And it's the primary reason why IVF success rates drop with age and miscarriage rates rise. By the time a woman reaches the age of 35, about 40 to 50% of those eggs will actually have an incorrect number of chromosomes. On episode 30 of my fertility podcast, we talked about pre-implantation genetic testing for aneuploidy with our phenomenal genetic counselor, Diane Miles-Reid, about PGTA and its context in IVF.
So, what is this breakthrough all about? Well, researchers at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, led by Dr. Melina Shu, identified a protein called shugoshin. It actually means guardian spirit in Japanese. This protein acts as a molecular glue holding together the chromosome pairs. And here's a critical finding. Shugoshin levels decline as the eggs get older. So, eggs for women over 35, most chromosomes actually lack this protective bridge called the shugoshin. Without it, the chromosomes are more vulnerable. They separate at the wrong time, as Dr. Weiss had explained, and therefore you end up with embryos that are chromosomally abnormal. Now, this brilliant team of researchers didn't just stop at identifying the problem, they actually tested a solution. They microinjected the shugoshin protein into donated human eggs from fertility patients. The results were outstanding. Chromosomal defects dropped from 53% in the untreated eggs to 29% in the treated eggs. That is approximately cutting this problem in half. Now, although this is incredibly encouraging, of course, this is still far from being available in clinical practice. I wish we could start using this tomorrow. However, these eggs still have to be tested to fertilize or develop into embryos. These embryos have to develop into healthy children with no downstream effects from this injection of the protein. And many clinical trials are still needed to prove this and make it part of clinical practice. But I mean, I can't believe I'm seeing this. But for the first time, we're not just describing why eggs age, we're actually finding a way to fix it at a molecular level. And that is absolutely amazing. And I hope that I can live long enough to see this applied to clinical practice.
Yeah, I'm very curious to see what becomes of this story and to see sort of how this pans out over the long term. This is really interesting. So we're changing gears a little bit here. The next story that we're going to talk about is a little different because it involves a drug that's already been approved by the FDA in the US, already being prescribed to thousands of people for other reasons. But researchers are finding that it might do something we've never been able to do before and actually slow down ovarian aging. This drug is called rapamycin. And if you are a listener of this podcast, you may recall that on episode 5, when we spoke with the egg whisperer, she mentioned this specifically as a treatment that she will sometimes prescribe to patients. So there was a study published in Cell Reports Medicine in November of 2025 that looked at what's happening inside aging eggs at the cellular level. They found that as eggs age, the cellular machinery becomes overactive, specifically the parts that build proteins. So when you're constantly making proteins without properly maintaining quality control, so to speak, you end up with a buildup of damaged, misfolded proteins, and this creates stress that reduces egg quality. Rapamycin works by dialing down this overactivity. It helps cells focus on maintenance and repair rather than just this constant production. Think of it like this. Young cells have a good balance between making new things and taking out the garbage. Aging cells get overwhelmed making too much stuff without cleaning up. Rapamycin may help restore that balance.
Now, what is even more interesting is that they actually translated this knowledge into a clinical trial. So, researchers in China conducted a trial with 100 women undergoing IVF with the average age of 36 years of age who had experienced prior IVF failures. About half of them, like 50 women, received the standard treatment, and the other half received 1 milligram of oral rapamycin daily for 3 to 4 weeks before the egg retrieval. The results were actually quite meaningful. Women taking rapamycin had a higher number of zygotes as embryos, more day 3 embryos, more blastocysts, and more top quality blastocysts. And although only 40 patients have had embryo transfers in each group, the reported clinical pregnancy rates were 50% in the rapamycin group compared to 28% in the control group. More importantly, the number of eggs retrieved was the same in both groups. So rapamycin wasn't giving necessarily more eggs, but it was improving the quality of the eggs that they already had. Now, despite this promising research, rapamycin is not currently approved for fertility treatments, and women should not start taking this on their own. We still need larger trials to confirm the findings, but it is hopeful, and if validated, it could be part of some IVF protocols.
Now, before everybody runs to their physician asking for a rapamycin prescription, it's important to keep in mind that this drug does carry significant risks, including immunosuppression and increased susceptibility to infections and maybe even malignancies like cancers, as well as metabolic disturbances and some organ-specific toxicities. The side effects with rapamycin are actually really common. I mean, like 14 to almost 50% of people who take it will have oral ulcers, and like 30% of people on it develop acne. So, these are real potential risks.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is easy. Honestly, I got very excited as well when I saw that trial.
Mhm.
And of course, yeah, we all want to do everything that we can to help our patients.
Yeah.
But I think it is important to take this with some caution. We don't know what the long term side effects are. It is not approved for fertility. And one trial with 100 patients is just not enough to make it part of a standard clinical practice.
Mhm. This next breakthrough sounds like science fiction, but it's already actually helping families. And you might have heard of this 3-parent IVF in the news recently. The actual medical term is mitochondrial replacement therapy or mitochondrial donation. We're including this not because most of you will need it. In fact, you probably won't, but because it teaches us something important about what's possible when we think differently. So let's take a step back here. Many women carry mutations in their mitochondrial DNA. The tiny powerhouse of our cell, again, if you remember high school biology, actually has a different set of DNA than the rest of the cells in our body. Now, these mutations in mitochondrial DNA can cause devastating diseases affecting the heart, brain, muscles, any tissue that needs a lot of energy. And because mitochondria and that mitochondrial DNA are inherited only from the egg provider, these diseases pass down through the maternal line. Now, for years, women with these mutations faced an impossible choice: either have no children, use an egg donor, or risk passing on a potentially fatal disease.
So, what is this 3-parent IVF? Well, basically, it's achieved by using genetic material from 3 individuals: the nuclear DNA from both intended parents and mitochondrial DNA from an egg donor to create an embryo. So, both eggs, the intended parents and the donor eggs, are fertilized. The nuclear DNA, all the genes that make the child look like you, think like you, have your traits, is taken from the patient's fertilized egg and transferred into the donor egg, which has the healthy mitochondria, but now it has removed its own nuclear DNA. The resultant embryo has nuclear DNA from both parents, but healthy mitochondrial DNA from the donor. The donor's contribution is only about 0.1% of the total DNA, which doesn't affect any of the inherited traits. In July of 2025, Newcastle University reported on 8 babies born using this technique, and these outcomes were published in the New England Journal of Medicine. All 8 children were born healthy and all are developing normally. The disease-causing mutations from the mitochondrial DNA are completely undetectable or at levels that are too low to cause harm.
So, unless you have an actual diagnosed mitochondrial disorder, this isn't very relevant to your specific treatment. But it matters because it proves something. Embryos are being safely manipulated in really sophisticated ways. Regulatory systems can approve and monitor complex new techniques. And sometimes the quote unquote impossible becomes possible when we ask the right questions. Now, this technology is currently only available at one clinic in the UK under very specific and strict regulatory oversight. But it's a really important reminder that science keeps pushing boundaries carefully and thoughtfully when families need it.
The next breakthrough is different from the things that we've talked about before. This is a finding that really made me pause and think when I first read about it. And it is about microplastic in reproductive fluid, which is a new concern we never thought about before. In 2025, researchers found microplastic in human reproductive fluid, specifically the follicular fluid, which is the liquid surrounding your eggs. An Italian study published in February of 2025 the results of the examination of the follicular fluid from 18 women undergoing IVF. They found microplastic in 14 out of the 18 samples. That's 78%. The particles were tiny, smaller than a cell. At the European Society of Human Reproduction and Endocrinology, a major fertility conference in July of 2025, Spanish researchers reported finding microplastic in 69% of follicular fluid samples and 55% of semen samples from couples undergoing fertility treatment. Now, you might ask yourself, what are the most common plastics that they found? Well, they found Teflon, polypropylene, polyester, polyamide, and polyethylene. Everything from non-stick cookware to water bottles to food packaging to synthetic clothing.
So, what does this actually mean from a clinical perspective? And here's the honest answer: we don't know yet. In animal studies, microplastic exposure has been associated with inflammation, oxidative stress, hormonal disruption, reduced egg quality, and lower sperm counts. But we don't know if the levels found in humans are high enough to cause problems. We also don't know if they're directly affecting fertility or if they're just markers of exposure. We just really don't know what the long-term effects are. Dr. Emilio Gomez Sanchez, who led the Spanish study, was very clear. He said, quote, "There's no need for alarm at this point. Microplastics are just one of many elements that may play a role in fertility," end quote. So, while we wait for more research, here are some sensible precautions. Number one, try using glass or stainless steel containers for food instead of plastic. Number two, never microwave food in plastic. Number three, try using stainless steel or cast iron cookware. Number four, replace scratched nonstick pans. And number five, try choosing natural fibers over synthetic fibers for clothing when you can.
The bottom line is this: if you're going through IVF, please don't panic about microplastics right now, but you can try to make simple changes that can reduce future exposure. The research is too early to say microplastics are definitely causing your fertility problem. But given what we know from animal studies, I think taking reasonable precautions absolutely makes sense. This is definitely an emerging area, and we can expect to hear more about this in the coming years. And we actually talked about this in episodes 6 and 7 when we talked about lifestyle factors that can impact fertility.
Last but not least, let's talk about something that might seem, pretty trivial compared to the big science we've been discussing. But it's something that many of our patients and many of the physicians here at Market Fertility also use routinely, which is nail polish. In September of 2025, the European Union banned a key ingredient in gel nail polish called TPO due to reproductive toxicity concerns. This resulted in a lot of patients asking if they should be worried about their manicure. Traditional polishes and gel polishes contain chemicals of concern, including phthalates, TPHP, and TPO. These are plasticizers and hardeners. They're also known endocrine disruptors. Research has shown that when you paint your nails, these chemicals are absorbed through your nail beds and skin, and they're actually detectable in your urine within hours. A higher phthalate exposure has been linked to fewer eggs retrieved during IVF, lower antral follicle counts, reduced pregnancy rates, and hormonal disruptions.
Now, let's put this into context. In reality, one manicure isn't going to change your fertility potential. The concern is about cumulative, repeated exposure over time. Your body can handle small exposures to a lot of things. But when you're exposed to endocrine disrupting chemicals from multiple sources like nail polish, plastic, cosmetics, cleaning products, pesticides, then the combined effects actually adds up over time. So what's our advice? Well, consider taking breaks during nail polish or try to time these breaks during active IVF treatments. For example, for regular nail polish use, consider using higher N-free polishes like 7-free, 10-free, or higher. Make sure you read the labels carefully. Maybe look at a salon with proper ventilation to reduce exposure to chemicals during the application, or try it at home manicures. And take breaks. Consider going polish-free periodically over time. We live in a world where avoiding every single hormone disrupting chemical just isn't realistic, and that's okay. It's not about being perfect or cutting out everything you love. It's about balance. Self-care is important, but also feeling good in your body matters too. With a few thoughtful adjustments, like being mindful about timing, product choices, ventilations, you can still enjoy these routines that help you feel confident and cared for, while also protecting your fertility.
We have definitely covered a lot today. We've talked about new technologies and research helping us understand why eggs age and potential of slowing ovarian aging. Three-parent IVF as well that may be preventing mitochondrial diseases and microplastics in reproductive fluids and even nail polish. Now that's a lot. And if you're going through fertility treatment right now, I know it can feel overwhelming to take all of this in. So let me tell you what I really want you to walk away with. Science continues to advance. researchers are working on better understanding of fertility and developing new approaches. Some of these advances will be available soon. Others are many, many years away. The timeline varies a lot, but the work continues. Now, it's worth also mentioning that not every breakthrough applies to every person. For instance, STAR may help couples with severe male factor infertility. The Sugar-Shin research focuses on age-related egg quality specifically. Remember, your journey is your own. These breakthroughs may or may not apply to your situation, but understanding what's being researched helps you have informed conversations with your doctor about your treatment options.
And one of the things that we do with the podcast is help you make informed choices. There are many factors that you cannot control, but there's many that you can control. For example, reducing environmental exposure, lifestyle modifications, when to seek testing, where to get your treatment. So understanding the science helps you make better decisions. And finally, things need to be realistic. When you're going through fertility treatment, it's important to understand that what's actually possible now versus what is being researched in the future are two different things. Hope doesn't mean expecting miracles. It means understanding the current state of science, what we know, what we don't know, and what we're learning.
As always, stay tuned to My Fertility Podcast, where we're always going to be bringing you the newest, hottest, latest developments in the field of fertility, and hopefully following these stories along as they progress and potentially may become treatment options for our patients at Markham Fertility Center.
Disclaimer, this episode was recorded in April of 2026. The science can change over time. And also, I want to give credit to Dr. Maria Hincapié, who has helped us doing the research for this episode.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans.
If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast or visit us online at markandfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss. Music, Island Memories, instrumental by Descript stock music. My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.